Welcome to Writer Syndrome, a podcast about writing from start to finish. This episode's topic is story archetypes. I'm Russ Capasso. Joining me as always is Tim Ledney. Tim, how are you? Because I always ask you that.
I am well, Russ. Thanks for asking. I appreciate
your
feeling concern.
Are you feeling like an archetype right now?
Yes, I am feeling what am I feeling?
Like
one of them. I don't know what one.
I'm not sure which
Try
one
to
yet.
fit me into one by the end of this.
So we're gonna tackle archetypes, or as I like to say, archetypes.
Archetypes.
Archetypes. We're gonna break them up into two different sessions though, because we realized there's a lot to cover. So we're gonna do this one. We're gonna cover story archetypes. There's generally speaking like 7, and then we'll do another episode about characters, because that's gonna be a little more deep dive into the different character types there are. So yeah, story archetypes. Do you feel I'm going to come out right off the bat here, and we're both going to answer this. I'm going to do this.
You always give me this stumper to start with that I stumble through.
I know, it's going to be great. Don't worry, I'll edit it to make you sound really, really, really smart.
Good luck.
Well, I'm going to have to answer it too, so I'm stalling. Do you feel your story falls into a particular archetype?
I can say broadly, I think it falls into one with a little bit of another.
Okay.
And then why don't we list them?
Okay. All right. So the 7, these are, so this is off Masterclass. There's also, you can find this pretty much anywhere, selfpublishingschool.com. But there's generally speaking like 7 classic story archetypes, right? So there's like the rag to riches. I'll just list them and then we can go through them, kind of deep dive if we kind of go through our own experience from them. But so there's rag to riches, the quest, rebirth, overcoming the monster. There's the comedy, there's a tragedy, and then voyage and return. So these are kind of like the general models for most of the stories we read, watch, and hear about, right?
Do you fit into any of these very succinctly?
I would say
square peg, square hole.
I don't think so. So, I mean, I think like falling into one is great. That's fine. I feel like mine might be like a little. I think mine falls more in like the quest, right? I think there's thing that my characters are searching for. They kind of travel the world finding this thing, but I also think there might be a little mix of like maybe a voyage and return where my character, he goes away and he comes back kind of a changed person and his new wisdom and life experience and gets him through something. But I don't think mine fits the square hole square peg.
I don't think many do, and I think we can go through that. Like as I was looking at examples of each of them, arguments can be made for some that are the quest that also fit voyage and return, right? They're super similar. And I'll say for mine, I feel like it's mostly overcoming the monster, and whether that's the physical monsters in the book or internal monsters. But I certainly have questing, but I wouldn't say that's the core plot of the book.
Yeah. So I guess we should take a quick step back and say, like, in case no one knows what we're talking about, archetypes are basically like a model for how to tell a story, right? Even a character, right? I'm going to use the word formula to like accomplish the goals of a story. And we'll dive into each one. But they're not like...
And I think they existed before they were named, right? I think what we're referring to is like literary theory. When people went back and looked at, literature that had been written over time, they tended to fall within these basic 7 plots.
Yep.
Not always so neatly, but it's a way to categorize, and which, is maybe a little reductive, I think, when it comes, but as a new writer planning, I think it's a helpful tool to think about a starting point for you, right? Because
we were both like, I think we started reading like research and we were like, oh, this would have been helpful if we actually focused on this and thought about this a bit more.
Well, you brought up a good point that it was in Save the Cat that we had read.
It was.
And even then I was like, mine mostly fits into one of these, and I don't recall what Jessica Brody's her like nomenclature was for it, but it was similar. They were similar.
She's got like 10 in here, but there's a lot of like it's kind of weird because they're kind of a cross between. It's interesting. I guess genre could also be an archetype, right? If you're saying you're writing a thriller, it's like a model for the type of story you plan to tell, and there's certain things you need to accomplish within that. Or is it? I guess like it's archetype, and then
I think it's
kind of they kind of work together.
I think
right?
genre would be umbrella term, right?
Yeah.
And then inside of that genre, you'd have an archetype story, because I think you could have a sci-fi story
that's like a whodunit,
got a quest,
who done it, or something like that. Yeah,
like what Robots and Murder or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like so, like in the Save the Cat, they've got a whodunit, rites of passage, institutionalized superhero, dude with a problem, full triumphant buddy love, out of the bottle, golden fleece, monster in a house. But these are kind of mashups of all the 7 we'll go through on the master class just to kind of keep it focused. So all these things, all these structures, all these stuff we talk about, it's like mostly all just guides to kind of keep you focused. And I think, again, setting expectations for for when you read up your synopsis or whatever, you're telling the reader what you're actually going to do in the story, so they're not like thrown off.
Using it as a tool, to get going. Yeah. It's something that, in hindsight, I leaned into a little, but I was like, we'll make this a little organic. And
yeah,
I think they can be used, like I said before, as a resource and a jumping off point, because you don't want to get to, act 2 of your book and be like, what kind of book is this? Like, where is this generally falling? Like by then you should kind of know.
Yeah.
And in fact, you should probably know before you put pen to pad.
And as we keep saying, make sure you know where they're going, where they're going to end up. Make sure you know where your characters end up.
Yeah, we can have a whole other podcast about that one.
Third acts, Jesus. All right, so should we just go through each of these?
Yeah, let's go through them.
So from the masterclass one, 7 classic story archetypes. So the first one I got is Rags to Riches, which is also in the Save the Cat. Pretty straightforward, right? Rags to Riches story. Poor derelict main character gains something they lack: money, power, love, loses it, and then wins it back again by the end of the story. I guess it's pretty popular, like fairy tales, like Cinderella. Disney animated films are pretty big with this, right? Aladdin, Ratatouille, that type of story. I guess it's it's also like an underdog story. We'll move on. So do you want to go to the quest?
Yes.
So the quest, main character must reach a certain location, attain a certain object, or fulfill a certain objective while conquering many obstacles along the way. Classic examples, we've got the Odyssey, Lord of the Rings, which Tim loves.
Just about done with 2 Towers right now, reading to the kids.
Harry Potter series, like those are like the kind of very obvious examples of the quest. I think my book falls pretty strongly in this category. And yours has also got a lot of questing going on, right?
So I have some questing, but I don't think that it is at its core that story archetype.
Yeah.
And I think that might be just I might have questing in there because of my experience reading books of this nature. I think it might have just kind of organically come out that they needed like kind of goals and like little side quests to move them about.
I mean, yours is definitely this and the one of the following ones coming up, I think.
It doesn't start off as a quest. It's I would lean on that it has aspects of this one, but it's not the whole thing.
Yeah.
The quest is relatively straightforward. It's what we think about when we have like, fantasy books or
the majority of like fantasy, probably even sci-fi is going to be.
I mean, quest would fall into the hero's journey, right? That's like the Joseph Campbell.
Yes. So then the next one, third one, and not in any particular order, just I guess is how they numbered them. Rebirth. So the Rebirth story archetype has its roots, typically obviously in religion. Think of biblical resurrection of Jesus, the Jesus. But in common practice, it may simply involve a character changing their ways and becoming a better person, resulting in a happy ending. Old school examples: Christmas Carol, that's a classic rebirth story. Beauty and the Beast, and for some reason I have Groundhog Day listed in here, which is a very random movie to list. But
yeah, for me, rebirth in books and movies, it tends to be an aspect, but not the core story archetype. I mean, it always happens, it happens in Lord of the Rings, but because it happens to Gandalf, it happens
Matrix.
It happens in the Matrix,
I mean,
right?
Like
it happens in a bunch of stuff, but I wouldn't say that it's necessarily that story archetype.
All right, so the next one we got here, Overcoming the Monster. So this story archetype, rooted in ancient classics like Perseus, Beowulf, and the biblical David and Goliath, involves a hero who must conquer some sort of evil force. So this is kind of interesting because I see that they're listing the original Star Wars trilogy fits this archetype. As we all know, we love to talk about Star Wars here.
What?
Yeah, and this is the one that they're saying is tied to the hero's journey. This is kind of fascinating. Like these two different articles have like completely different takes on like they're using all the same words, but like all of the examples are falling into like completely different categories, which is really funny. But I mean, the way this is described, overcoming the monster, yeah, sure, I guess that would be Star Wars, would be overcoming the monster.
But how is that not the hero's journey?
I mean, it totally is, which is like a whole nother archetype in itself, right?
Right.
Which also falls in kind of the quest. So these are all kind of like mashed together.
And maybe I'm being a little too literal with overcoming the monster, because in my head I think Frankenstein. Right.
Yeah.
I think Dracula. I think like
that's listed here too. Such stories often intertwine with theorists. Joseph Campbell referred to as the hero's journey. So this will intertwine with the hero's journey. Not that it is. So again, the hero's journey kind of covers a lot of general storytelling.
It's a kitchen sink approach, right? It's like, I don't think it's necessarily a story archetype. It's like the story structure.
Yeah.
Of many story archetypes.
Yeah. Which like all of these can fall into.
And so I think if I'm being literal, mine would be literally this archetype. I think I have an overcoming the monster.
Your story, yes.
I think so.
Yeah,
because I think there is both like the external physical monsters that exist in the tangible world, and I think there is like the illusory societal monsters, and I think there's the internal demons and monsters, and I think that's where my book comfortably fits.
Yes.
But there's questing, there's the hero's journey, there's a rebirth. There's rebirth. Geez, I've got man.
I've
got a lot of these. Yeah.
So that's Overcoming a Monster. And then we got the comedy, but a comedic plot line, subvert expectations, and blend the familiar with the absurd to keep audiences laughing on their toes. So, I mean, it's a comedy.
And I don't know what he falls into, like absurdist, but I feel like so much of Pynchon is comedy.
Okay.
Like, because there's this kind of like postmodernism, especially when you get to things like Inherent Vice. Like Inherent Vice had me laughing out loud. Like it's so rare that I sit down and read a book and laugh out loud, right? And it was just so humorous. Yet it's a detective story, right?
Yeah.
So his genre would be
like a crime,
but the main character is a burnout from like post-hippie era who can't remember any of the plot threads, and it's hysterical. Like he just stumbles from vignette scene to vignette scene. Is like the least effective private eye ever. It had me rolling. Like absolutely loved it. Same thing with Crying a Lot 49. Yet Gravity's Rainbow, which is absurdist and but yet sci-fi in a way I couldn't get through. So it was too thick and I couldn't find the humor in it. But I would lump, and maybe I'm wrong, but for things that I find like comedy, I feel like Pynchon falls really, really nicely into that bucket.
And then on the mirror image side of things, the next archetype would be tragedy, which is protagonist is undone by a critical character flaw or by the cruelty of fate. Bill Shakespeare there, as I like to call him. Bill Shakespeare.
Oh, yeah, Billy.
Billy.
Yep, the old Billy.
The old Billy Shakespeare kind of nailed this one. Macbeth, Hamlet, King Lear, Othello, Romeo and Juliet. Heavy in that category.
I think most, if we're talking about things that don't fit nicely, I feel like most or a lot of books will have a tragedy element. It's usually when you get into like the character turn of All is Lost and Dark Knight.
Yep.
I think the difference in tragedy is that it ends on that note. It ends on like there isn't a happy ending. There is very much like, if I'm thinking of modern day examples that I've recently read, like Pet Sematary, I think is a tragedy, even though it fits into this kind of overcoming the monster mold. I think it's a tragic story and it feels that way. And I think King has written a few of them over the years. Even The Shining, probably a tragedy. Whereas like it is much more probably overcoming the monster with a little bit of the quest.
And then the final one, Voyage and Return, which again, this just feels like
hero's journey,
right? So Voyage and Return story sends the protagonist to a strange land from which they will return armed with wisdom and life experience. That's basically the hero's journey. Hero's journey covers like 3 of these 7. But again, I think it's like we said, I think it's more story structure, and then these kind of fall into like the, maybe sub buckets here. There's always sub buckets when it comes to writing, there's always sub buckets, and
it's interesting, right? So like with this masterclass resource, they put Voyage and Return, they put The Hobbit in there.
Yes.
But they put Lord of the Rings in the quest.
It's like,
but they have very similar structures.
Yes.
And I mean, did they put The Hobbit there just because the subtitle is there and back again? I mean, because if you're looking literally at Lord of the Rings, it's there and back again. Like they go out and they come back. It's just much more grand in scale. It's much, much bigger.
And I think so going through those are the general 7 there, but I think what the thing to note here is that, again, these can all be, I mean, as we're going through them, we're realizing and seeing that they can all just be mixed and matched, right? You can have elements of each one. So you can take, like, I'm reading this other resource here. And it's like, how do you make this, Voyage and Return your own? You can, mix and match these and, with the different character types, right? So you can have a character who easily goes on a voyage and return after having slaughtered the evil darkness, plaguing the other land, so overcoming the monster. And then they can also have all their hopes and dreams destroyed when they're in the other land, tragedy. So you can like mash these things together to kind of create your own story. So I think that's the key thing, is that no story will necessarily fit directly in any of these buckets. It could. I think that's fine. But
and maybe if you're writing for like a younger audience, maybe you stick firmly in Voyage and Return because it won't be as long to have like multiple questing elements, right?
yeah,
I think the examples they're giving are more childlike. The Hobbit skews way younger than Lord of the Rings does.
yeah.
They're including Alice in Wonderland skews way younger.
So yeah, I mean that's it. Those are roughly the 7 classic story archetypes. I don't know. Is there anything else you want to comment about those, or
No, other than it's just kind of a mess, and
yeah,
you use them to get started and don't feel locked into them.
yeah,
And like Russ said, pick and choose, for different elements or different moments in your story from other ones if it's going to strengthen the piece.
yeah.
I do feel like you should have one main, like one that you feel comfortably falling into, and then take elements of a couple others. But
having one where you're like, okay, this is the general story one, because it would definitely help you like kind of guide, right? And like we said in the beginning, we're like, man, I kind of wish I thought more about these when I first started writing. But I think a lot of times, some of these things might happen as you're going through the story. Like, so if you pick one, you're like, all right, I'm going to do a Voyage and Return, but you might pull in some other elements from some other parts which I think you might discover as you go along, and that's fine. But I think as long as you're kind of staying focused on like, this is a story, because that's what, again, coming back to like the reader expectations, if you set that up as this being the story and then halfway through all of a sudden it becomes a comedy or something, it's like, well, what are you doing here? You've kind of pulled the rug out from under your reader. So
especially if you're just getting started, I feel like if you want to experiment as time goes on. But I think one of the reasons why I was initially a little squirrely around these is because as a new writer, it feels reductive and you want to believe that your work is special. And it's not. I mean, no offense. I mean, it's special because it's your perspective and it's your words and it's your lived experience. But as far as structure and expectations, it shouldn't be. It's at least if it's like your first novel or two.
I think it's more of like know these tools so you can then create your own story, but with your perspective. I think that's what's important to know. So
I think because once again, we want it to be. Personally, I want it to be a collaborative experience, and I want to have some relatable elements with the audience. I don't want it to just be me depositing knowledge. I want there to be certain touch points where people can relate to certain things and challenge or agree with. And these tools I think help because they're what we expect, as humans when it comes to fiction and especially genre fiction.
Yeah, so then we'll tackle the characters next time. But I don't know. So what have you been reading and watching?
Still going through Lord of the Rings, Two Towers with the kids. We're about 70% done. They're staying up more and not falling asleep to it because I think it's gotten interesting for them.
Okay.
Before they were like, oh, Rohan and Horse Lords and
doing dishes
orcs.
and
But as soon as we got to like Frodo, Sam, and Gollum, they're like, keep reading because the book has gotten so much more accessible. It's way more accessible than the Fellowship was, and now just with these character moments, and it's a lot of dialogue, and the kids are just rallying around like Gollum's speech patterns, and how like it's very engaging. Like last night, Quinn was like, "I love how he talks. He's so cute." It's weird how that kind of comes across.
Yeah.
Just with language and just with sentence structure and repetition that Tolkien uses. So it made me think of like I use a character and I try to give him a little bit of an accent. Another one of those kind of tools at your disposal, like how to make a character stand out and seem otherworldly or different. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, very much in the quest / hero's journey. The quest, right?
Yeah, I think it's. I mean, it's a whole bunch, but I guess it's the quest. It is a quest. It's more of a quest, I think, than the Hobbit because they're like, here, Frodo, here's a ring, go do this.
go do this thing.
Now, everybody else, you have other quests, right? Yeah. Like they're kind of sprawling out across the map. And then I'm still reading The Deep, just about done with that.
That's a Nick Cutter one.
Yeah, it's that Cutter one.
Is it as good as the Troop?
It's different than the Troop.
Okay. Is it horror still, or?
It is horror.
Okay.
It's more of like a Leviathan or Alien, how it's like a remote facility, whether it be space or underwater type of thing.
Yep.
And something's amiss. So it has elements of like, I think more film touch points. It has elements of like Leviathan or the Abyss, or there's all these like, you're trapped on an isolated derelict something or other, whether it be a lab or a space station, and people are going crazy. So it's a little more like Sunshine or Event Horizon in that way.
Okay.
So but it falls very firmly in that genre or that subgenre of you're isolated and going crazy and you can't get out. And how do you do it?
Overcoming the monster type of thing.
Yeah, except the monsters are, I mean, there is an external monster.
Yeah.
But it's hard to tell whether it's a hallucination of like the monsters within. People's past keeps coming to haunt them, which is very, very honestly.
Okay.
Where like, is there this kind of otherworldly thing that's manifesting their fears?
Yeah.
The world itself is interesting because it's weird because he sets up above the ocean. At first, there's this outbreak that's happening, and it's called the Gets, and people keep forgetting. It's like Alzheimer's. But turned up to 1,000.
Yeah.
So that's the setup. Like the world is going through an apocalypse, and people are getting sick because of this outbreak, and other people are researching this kind of new potential treatment at the bottom of the ocean.
Yep.
So people can't tell if this kind of new treatment is making them crazy or if maybe they're falling victim to this virus. And I'm like, I kind of wish more of the story took place up top during the outbreak scenario, because that's always interesting to me, as opposed to like, this happened, this is kind of the background world that we're living in. Now we're going to go down, 18 miles under the ocean and think about our fears and go into multiple flashbacks, many flashbacks of like things that I don't find scary. Like, I think this author he's scared of trunks for some reason. Trunks scare him.
Trunks?
Not like elephant trunks, but
like a car trunk?
No, like
a trunk you put stuff in.
Yeah, like it was like his toy trunk.
Oh, okay.
Like when he was a kid. Yeah. But then there's other trunks. It's like, and there's a monster in the trunk maybe, and there's a flashback about how he was scared of the trunk, and trunks don't scare me. They never have. So it was hard to relate to like that.
You've never been trapped in one, so you don't know yet.
Neither was he. Except now, for the metaphor is that he's in one, right, under the water, and
Yeah, the day you become scared of trunks is when you get locked inside of one. So that's
But if you're a horror fan, I'd recommend it. It's not bad. I mean, the troop is just disgusting and fun.
Yeah,
this is a little less fun. They're always just crawling through a vent. It's like Lord of the Rings, but with vents. It's very dark and they can't see, and that's it.
Come out to the coast, have a few drinks.
Watching The Fall of the House of Usher on Netflix, which is that new Flanagan joint.
Okay.
He's a talented dude. I don't love his King adaptations. I guess Gerald's Game was okay. Yeah. But Dr. Sleep, not so much. I enjoyed the book, but the movie, not so much. But yeah, so he's done like Midnight Mass, which I thought was really great. He did, what was it? Haunting on Hill House, stuff like that. So his new one is kind of sort of Edgar Allan Poe adaptation of The Fall of the House of Usher. Okay. But inside of that, it actually happens to be adaptations of like Murders at the Rue Morgue, like Telltale Heart a little bit.
Okay.
So like my experience, I think those it's like homework when you're in middle school and high school to read those shorts. So I think most of us have read them. So it's a bummer only because it's going to happen in the episodes if you've read any of the short fiction that exists. So he does some really nice kind of, plot moves to distract you from what's going to happen. But if you read the book, what's going to happen.
Yeah.
You know that there's going to be a monkey attacking. Somebody's going to be trapped in the wall, But it's good. I'd give it, it's a really great, Halloween watch. So it's his last Netflix jam. I think he's moving on to maybe Amazon.
Okay.
I think they might have tapped him for Dark Tower, maybe.
Oh, interesting.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not sure.
I don't know. I'm not sure.
But I know his agreement with Netflix is over now. Anyway, how about you? What are you reading? What are you watching?
Let's see. I just started. I'm about a third of the way through The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I had never read it, so
that's a nice comp for where you are right now.
That's exactly what I'm. Yeah, that's why I picked it up. So I'm gonna probably read the trilogy because it seems like all the three that was it Stieg there wrote. Seemed
Larson,
like to be
Stieg Larsson.
Yeah. The three that he wrote are good, and then all the other ones that I guess someone else had picked up, like writing like a whole series, and they're kind of like somewhat mediocre.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, someone else had, like, the family. It was kind of interesting. I was kind of doing some quick research on it because he passed away in like 2004, I think, suddenly.
Oh,
I guess the family had taken over, obviously the whole his estate there, and handed off to someone who's now written like 6 or 7 other Girl, Spider's Web or whatever, blah blah blah. And they're kind of just like, it's funny to see all of them just drop below 4 stars. Like the first 3 are like 4 stars plus on like Goodreads or something, and then the rest are like 3.7, 3.8. So clearly a dip in quality.
Oh man, he died of a heart attack at 50.
Yeah, man.
Oh, man, I guess in addition to writing, you gotta exercise.
Go for a run. While you're listening to this podcast, go for a run, okay? Go for a walk.
I mean, it could have been a genetic something or other, but
absolutely. But
I will say that as I've been like into editing as much as I have been lately, I am sitting so much, so much.
Gotta go for those walks.
It's crazy. Like, actually, I'm thinking about getting a standing desk and a little walking treadmill underneath, because if this is what it's going to be, like if I continue to write and work,
this is your life.
Dude, you got to move.
You got to move. So yeah, I started that. Really enjoying it, man. It is. I mean, I've seen the movies. I've seen the original, and then I've seen the remake, David Fincher's, which I love both of them. But man, reading the book, it's like this is heavy, dude. It's like 600-page book, and it's just like I forgot how many characters there are because it goes to the whole family tree and like.
Oh, wow.
Holy smokes. Like I'm forgetting all the different Vangers there are. I'm like, holy smokes. Like they even have like a family tree in like the book, like one chapter.
Oh, wow.
I'm just like, this is crazy. And then like all the detail, it's just so detailed. Like the backstory for every single person in the family too, like gets into it. I'm struggling with coming up with backstory for like 3 characters, and there's like 25 like family members, and he's got this whole thing where they came from. I'm like, holy shit. So kind of fascinating to see the detail, but it's and I'm also surprised at how engaged I am in reading it, because that's all it is. It's just like a ton of information right now. Like nothing is really happening other than the old grandfather there giving Bloomquist there the details of the backstory of his family, and it's just so much. But I'm enjoying that. That's all I've been reading right now. I got a couple other books lined up.
Was that his first book?
Oh, I have no idea.
I think it's his first. I think Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is his first book. I mean,
really?
I'm sure he's written shorts or something beforehand, but what an achievement.
Oh, now I feel really useless. Thanks for that.
Well, I mean, let's pull it back for a second. Is it enjoyable reading about all of the character biographies and knowing the family tree?
I mean, it is, but it's a lot. I mean, I'm enjoying it. I guess because, and it's weird because I've seen the movie, so I know how and I'm sure it falls pretty closely along with it. But like, I know where this goes, the mystery goes. But it's just, it's interesting. It's like picture like a sci-fi, really heavy sci-fi novel where like there's describing the world, right? And you're just like so engrossed in that world. And this is kind of like the same thing, but for like a crime thriller where you're like, I know all these details and all these things, and I'm curious to hear what the next like story of the next character we need to know about. And like, I think it's done really well.
Yeah,
it is in depth, and I'm only a third of the way through it, and it's just wowza.
Looks like he worked on some nonfiction books and like periodicals, but as far as fiction goes,
he was a journalist. I think he was.
Those 3 books are his only 3 books, and his first book is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. So that is super impressive.
Yeah, and crazy that he passed away in 2004 before he could probably really enjoy all like the acclaim it got. I mean, the original one came out in what?
He began writing his first book in 2002.
Best known for writing the Millennium trilogy of crime novels, starting in 2005.
Wow, that's crazy. He
was the second best-selling fiction author in the world for 2008, owing to the success of the English translation of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. The third and final novel of the Millennium Trilogy, The Girl Who Kicked the Hornet's Nest, became the best-selling book in the United States in 2010.
But good for him. It says he started working on the first chapter in 1997.
Okay, yep.
And then it was kicked down by some publishers, but eventually kind of picked up.
He had originally
planned, this was supposed to be 10 books, right?
Yeah, 10 books. He completed 2, and most of a third, he began looking for publishers. At the time of his death in 2004, only 3 had been completed.
That's crazy.
Anyways, so yeah, we're working through that. And then I started the Silo series.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's good.
4 episodes in, and I'm very much enjoying it.
Good. I'm glad you're enjoying it.
4 episodes in. I'm only 4 episodes in now, but I mean, there's
your own opinion.
There's only 10, so I am enjoying it. It's interesting because it feels like it's more of like kind of like a crime mystery than it is anything else.
It's like a mystery of like, how did this get made into a show?
I don't. Well, at least the 4 episodes, I don't feel that way. So maybe it's my inner contrario to Tim, my inner Tim contrario.
So you're 4 episodes in. I think at that point, hasn't a character died in every episode so far?
Yes, and she's become sheriff.
Right, because you want to promote the mechanic in this, fascist society.
That's how you give the person who needs to seek the truth, who knows there's a truth out there. That's how you give them the power to do that.
But
make them sheriff.
That doesn't make any sense.
It makes them sheriff.
They would never make her sheriff.
I mean, I think they discuss the dislike for that choice. I mean, pretty heavily.
But they're like,
and she's not technically. I mean, she's still like, she doesn't even want to do it either. So she's kind of like, I don't want to do this. And she's also like, hey, I'll find like. We'll keep doing this thing until we find.
She can't want to do it because in that part of the story, she's supposed to refuse the call.
Yes, that's true. And I mean, no one, even the deputy there doesn't want her to be doing this, but I think he's going to grow on her. Or she's going to grow on him.
It seems like a really strict society to just let somebody with no experience become sheriff. That's my only point.
I mean, they address that because they're like, hey, how much experience did you have as an engineer? She had none. So I guess she had a little bit from like when she's a kid when they do the flashbacks.
They're like, well, now you've got a gun and you're going to protect this really volatile underground facility.
Doesn't seem like anyone's really supposed to be doing what they're doing. I'm going to wait until I get to the end. I'm going to wait till I get to the end because I've got theories of what this place is, but I'm enjoying it so far. So
all right, good. I'm glad you're enjoying it.
So that's it. I think we're done. We're done here. We're done. This is it, right?
This is it. So next time we're doing character archetypes.
Yeah, we'll go through those. There's plenty to converse about that. So that'll be our next episode. But until then, thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this, share it with someone who you think would also enjoy it. You can follow us on Instagram, Writer Syndrome Books. We're still on the Twitter.
On the Twitters.
Writer_syndrome. We're now on the YouTubes, so you can go listen to us. We're on the YouTubes now, so you can go. We're starting to backfill some of our episodes there.
And I'll say if you're an author and want to be interviewed, we'd love to have you on.
Absolutely.
We've interviewed a couple before.
Yep.
And their sales just skyrocketed. I mean, like through the roof, bestsellers instantly as soon as we talk to you. So, but you can find all our episodes and all that information at our website, writersyndrome.com.